the text this week for the gospel reading is Luke chapter 14, verses 25 through 33. And it's a doozy. And so we're going to do a little visual meditation on the text itself. And then I'm going to go to Procreate and I'm going to do an illustration. It will be a visual meditation on the complexity and the difficulty of this text. Because first, I'm just going to read the gospel lesson. Now, large crowds were traveling with him. Let's put it in context. This is the Gospel of Luke. If I go back to my Gospel of Luke, if we go to a cartoonist guide to Luke, we'll see that chapter 14, it happens during this part right here, which is what we call the travel narratives of Luke, where Jesus is moving from the Mount of Transfiguration to the triumphal entry into Jerusalem. And the Gospel of Luke takes 10 chapters for Jesus to do that. And during these sessions, Jesus' teaching is really intense. And so if we click on this page, you'll see that for the last couple of weeks in the Gospels, we've been looking at these stories of healings on the Sabbath and Jesus having confrontations with the religious leaders. And last week we looked at this story of Jesus at a meal and talking about not choosing the best seat in the house. And so then Jesus is continuing down the road. And so that's what brings us to our text for today. This is a transitional text into the next part, which gets even more intense. So let's go back over to our text. So Jesus, the large crowds were traveling with him, and he turned aside and he said to them, "Whoever comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even life itself, cannot be my disciple. Whoever does not carry the cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. For which of you, intending to build a tower, does not first sit down and estimate the cost to see whether he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid a foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it will begin to ridicule him, saying, 'This fellow began to build and was not able to finish.' Or what king, going out to wage war against another king, will not sit down first and consider whether he is able with 10,000 to oppose the one who comes against him with 20,000? If he cannot, then, while the other is still far away, he sends a delegation and asks for the terms of peace. So therefore, none of you can become my disciple if you do not give up all your possessions." Whoa. And so, as I was thinking about this text at the beginning of the week, I was imagining a bunch of pastors who are looking at September 7th, thinking it's Rally Sunday or it's the Welcome Back to Church Sunday party. And what you really want is to have all of your families in church, right? It's Sunday school kickoff and everybody's back together. And you open up to do your study for the week for your sermon, and you're committed to the lectionary, and boom, this is your text. And so I'm like, huh, what does that children's sermon sound like? You gather all the children in front of you, all wide eyed and excited, and you say, "Okay, kids, here's what I want you to do. I want you to hate your parents this week. Can you do that for me?" Oh, yeah. This is a tough one. So, what I want to do is just slow down, look at the text visually, and then explore the theme of this text through drawing, and see if maybe God can meet us in the complexity and perplexity of this text. Does that sound good? All right, let's do it. So the first thing I want to do is uh, I just want to observe some things. So I'm going to choose this pencil and just read through the text again and say, now, this is what Jesus said: "Whoever comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even life itself cannot be my disciple. What? So hate, you're like, I thought this was Jesus, right? Isn't Jesus the guy who said, you have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy, but I say to you, you should love your enemy? So, like, I thought Jesus wants us to love everybody, and now he says that you have to hate your family and even hate life itself. What is going on? And then again, he does a second refrain of this. Whoever does not carry the cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. So we've got these two refrains. We've got whoever does not hate their family or life itself, and whoever does not carry the cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. And then he backs this up with two metaphors. The first one is, for which of you intending to build a tower does not first sit down and estimate the cost to see whether he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he has finished, when he has laid a foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it will begin to ridicule him, saying, this fellow began to build and was not able to finish. Okay, so there's a metaphor of building, but not seeing all the way to the end. Okay, now the second metaphor is, or what king going out to wage war against another would not sit down first and consider whether he is able with 10,000 to oppose the one who comes against him with 20,000. Okay, see that? Like, just in war, you got 20,000 soldiers, I've got 10,000 soldiers. What are the odds that my army is going to beat your army? Not very good. And it's interesting that Jesus is using this war metaphor, right? So if he cannot, then while the other is still far away, he sends a delegation and asks for the terms of peace, which is otherwise also means surrender, right? The terms of peace is war language for surrender. It admits, I can't beat you, so I surrender to you. These are the two metaphors that Jesus is using to talk about hating your family and carrying your cross. And then he concludes with this word. He says, so therefore, none of you can become my disciple if you do not, we change this to red because it's intense, right? Give up all your possessions. It's like, wait a minute, where did the idea of possessions come from? So this is an example of one of the first things that I do when I sit down with a text to visually study the text is I just try to observe. And so here you'll notice I'm using colors and shapes just to organize it. So we've got two movements at the beginning, one with this really intense word of hate, and another of this intense image of carrying a cross and following Jesus, to be a disciple of Jesus, to be a true apprentice or student of Jesus. And then we have two metaphors about counting the cost and really thinking about the whole journey before you jump into the journey. So that's what the text says. So now I'm going to switch over and open up Procreate. Oops, not Procreate Dreams. This is live TV, people. Anything can happen. I'm going to open up my app called Procreate. And in Procreate, I'm going to go into my live stream library. I'm going to do a 4K square image, and I'm going to turn my music back on because now I'm going to slip into more of creative, reflective mode. So I was kind of in my left brain there, just observing the text, hearing the text. Now I want to chew on the text. I want to do a visual contemplation of the text and see if maybe something emerges. Now, I had a technical, oh, good, sweet, right? Like I had this moment. Let me give you a little behind the scenes. I had this little moment like 5 minutes before I hit go live, and I put my Apple Pencil. I tried to, I was just warming up, and my Apple Pencil was completely dead, like zero. That has never happened before. And it's because when I put it on onto the side, it didn't magnetically connect, and so it was completely dead. And I was like, oh no, what am I going to do? That's why I was drawing with my finger. I was giving my Apple Pencil time to charge. So just for the record, 20 minutes, 97%, pretty sweet. All right, so here we are. What I like to do with when I'm doing any kind of artwork in Procreate is I like to knock down the background just a little bit. And I want to start with, I want to allow you some space and me some space to just kind of let the words of Jesus sink in, because he uses this word hate. And actually, I think that's one of the first things I want to do is just kind of play with this word hate, because it's such a difficult word. So one of the things that comes to my mind when I think about the word hate is it's a harsh word. It's a difficult word. And so I want to just choose like a really rough kind of brush. And I want to play with some reds and blacks and just like do some textures. And I invite you, if you're into creating drawings or contemplative art, I invite you to pull out your art supplies at this point. And man, this is an oil brush with a canvas texture on it. I'm kind of digging it. And just kind of emotionally reacting to the word hate, because honestly, I hate that word. Can you hate the word hate? I think so, because I don't know what to do with Jesus' words right away of hate. And so I'm opening myself up to the like I have this whole playlist of music that's happening in the background, and it's a random shuffle kind of playlist, and like I don't know what music's gonna come up, and I honestly don't know what's gonna happen in this drawing, because I'm just trying to respond to the word. So this is a noise brush. Oh, that's kind of cool. go back to this more intense red. I feel as I'm doing this, it's kind of like layers of chaos, that, and of course this evokes blood and violence. And, one of the reasons that hate is such a difficult word for us is because we live in an era of hate crimes, right? But if you just really think about the violence around that people do to each other, just around hate, it's hard to not just like blah, your gut just wrenched right out. Yeah. And so I'm going to make a new layer, and I think with this same texture brush, I just want to like see what happens if I just write out the word. And I can just kind of move that over here. And if I do, if I make that, let's see if there is a, so in Procreate you can use what's called a blending mode to make this layer interact with the layer below it in interesting ways. I think that's kind of, I think I'm going to stick with that. I think that's kind of interesting. So what does Jesus mean by this word hate? The Greek word, let me go to my live stream brush, my crumb brushian. The Greek word for hate, make sure I'm on a new layer. The Greek word for hate is miseo, and in English we would say that miseo. Freehand that, and it's where we get the word, like misogyny or misanthropic or misandrous. Like when you put mis in front of a word, it means you hate the thing that comes after that word. The prefix of hate is miseo. And some people, in trying to interpret this gospel text, are trying to say that what Jesus really meant was you just need to love that hate. This miseo really means love less. It doesn't mean hate, it means love less. And so I researched it and looked around at all the places where miseo shows up in the New Testament. And I discovered that miseo means hate. Because Jesus said that, like, the world, he said to his disciples, the world will hate you. It's miseo. And so I don't think we can get out of this word in this text that Jesus actually did say, unless you hate. Let's go back to the text. Like, what did he say? Unless you hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, you cannot be my disciple. So what does he mean by hate? Well, I want to take a stab at this, and one of the ways that I've been trying to make sense out of this is I really think it comes down to this idea of the self. And so I'm going to draw person. Just give like a little face. And I'm going to write the word self in here. So in our world, now psychologists and theologians have been studying the meaning of the word self for a long time, and nobody agrees exactly on what the sense of self is. And so before I get into where we're at right now in our culture about the self, I want to talk about the ancient world. Well, actually, I have to start with us. I do have to start with us. Because in the modern world, we think of the self as the individual, the I. I am the subject of the sentence, and I am the center of my universe, and my sense of self begins and ends with me. This is a radical individualistic understanding of the self. Okay, and there's a long history as to how we got here. But today, when you talk about the self, probably your default image of yourself is me. Like, I am myself. Well, in the ancient world, I'm going to try a new layer. In the ancient world, the sense of self was actually rooted in this sense of tribe or clan. The people who look like me, right? And there's a whole bunch of us, and we are connected by our family, right? And of course, the most basic unit of this identity is family. And I'm going to use the word clan because even the understanding of what is a family is different than in our modern world. So in the ancient world, the self was actually, I got to put that back. The self was actually not just me, but the me that begins in the we. I call this the we-me principle. And so notice the difference between I and me. I is the subject of a sentence, and me is the direct object, right? So I love you, you love me. That's a very different sense of self and placement in the structure, right? And so this sense of self in Jesus' world is I am my mother, my father, and my wife, and my children, and my aunts and uncles, and my clan, and my name, and all of that. And so go back to the text. Jesus said, unless you hate your father, mother, wife, children, brothers, sisters, yes, even life itself, you cannot be my disciple. See, this whole sense of clan was really a sense of, this is my life, right? This is my source of life. It is my reason for living. I would give my life for this clan, right? In war, whatever. And so here's one possible thing that Jesus was saying, perhaps, when he said, unless you hate these people and even life itself, you cannot be my disciple. I don't think that it was Jesus saying, like, when you see your dad, you need to hate that man. I think perhaps what Jesus is saying is that when you look at your family and your life and your sense of identity, you have to realize it's over. If you follow me, it's over. You're going to lose that. Let's sit with that for a second. Let's fast forward to the 21st century. I live in the United States of America. I am a middle-class white dude, grew up in the suburbs. Like, I am thoroughly entrenched in this culture of radical individualism. I am the point of everything. And everything in our society reminds me of that. Like, I deserve to be happy. I deserve to buy whatever I want. I deserve to get my way. And I'm a Gen Xer, right? I'm 57 years old. And here's what's really interesting is that what has shifted in the last generation is that the sense of self has gotten even more intensified, where now culture tells our children that your sense of self is not even it's not your family, it's not your church, it's not your denomination. Like, in the mid 20th century, we had this thing called the voluntary association. So, like, if you grew up in the church in the mid 20th century, you probably have kind of this sense of self that's defined by this church life, your church identity. But today, culture has gotten so radically individualistic. Like, Ted Smith calls it, he's quoting another scholar, and at this moment it escapes me, that our society has shifted to an individualization, or an individual. It's not just individualism where I think I'm really important. It's actually a social pressure that young people are now responsible to be the author of their own identity and how you are identified. And so here's what I want to put over here. What are the sources of identity in our culture? Well, of course, the main one is, if you got the cash, then you are something, right? So money, of course, is a source of identity. Another one is power, right? So I'm going to put, like, whoever holds the power, and I'm going to put lightning bolts in it. Then you are, if you have power, if you have, I'm going to put a cell phone right here, and I'm going to put a thumbs up in it, because I think I think the pressure for this generation is, like, you are good if you have a social media following. Like, you have to create your sense of self online and create this fictitious self, this performative self, in order to even exist. And this is like this, it's this frenetic treadmill. And the modern I understands itself as validated by all of these things. And Jesus said, look at that last line again. He said, none of you can become my disciple if you do not give up all your possessions. Your possessions. So in the ancient world, the sense of family that is my source of self, I possess that. And if you're in a rich family, then your reputation, it's also an honor and shame culture, right? Where the worst thing that a child of a wealthy family could do, this is especially true of like power clans, the worst thing that a child could do in a power clan was to bring disgrace to the family. And so all of the power that this family possesses you and shapes your sense of self. And in our 21st century context, the possessions, our money, our power, our social status, our popularity, our fame, all of those things are the possessions that possess us. And so Jesus said, unless you take up your cross and follow me, you cannot be my disciple. So what does that mean? I was thinking about this week. This metaphor right here about war, we put this in blue. This one was really interesting to me. Like, why did Jesus go to this metaphor of war and surrender in terms of peace? So here's something I've been thinking about. Jesus is the Messiah, right? And so he came as a Jewish man and preached and worked among Jewish people, and the Jewish people were under the oppression of Rome. And what the Jewish people wanted was for a leader to rise up and lead a political, violent revolution against Rome. And Jesus resisted that. And here's what I think part of his message about taking up your cross might be. He's telling his disciples, remember, he's going to Jerusalem. And they're so excited because in the synoptic gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, Jesus doesn't go to Jerusalem until this moment in his ministry. He's been doing all of his wonder working up in Galilee. And this is the moment. Like, he's just had transfiguration and he's marching to Jerusalem. And it's very likely that they were expecting him to raise up this army, or maybe even the host of heaven coming down and ousting the Romans, and victory is ours, and he marches in. And Jesus says, sorry, I'm not going to do that. And we have to always remember that what's happening in the socio-political background of these stories is that when these gospels were written, it's most probable that these gospels were written after the destruction of Jerusalem, because Israel did actually go to war against Rome, and they were at war for 4 years, and they got their butts kicked. Rome crushed them and destroyed the temple, just like Babylon did, centuries earlier, crushed them. And a lot of people suffered and died and were starved to death and massacred. And Jesus knew this was going to happen. Jesus knew in his day and the authors of the Gospels knew this is going to happen. And the people of Jerusalem could not see that the way of violence was the way of death. And so Jesus has an alternative way. And so I'm going to go to black, and I think I'm going to go back to this noisy brush. I really like it. Maybe I'll start with canvas. And Jesus says, I need you to take up your cross, right? Take up your cross and follow me. And what is that? Well, so I'm gonna do something here. I don't know if this is gonna work. I'm gonna duplicate this layer. Actually, here's what I'm gonna do. I did this before in a different. I'm gonna turn on my page assist, and I want to group all of these layers, and then so now this is one page. I want to duplicate this page so that now I can actually just move this guy up. What if what Jesus is calling us to do, both then and now, is to take up our own cross and we crucify this self. And actually, we don't crucify it. Because who crucified Jesus? It was the system itself. It was the imperial domination system of Rome. It was the religious domination system of the religious leaders of the Sanhedrin, who saw Jesus as a threat. And here's what I think one of the possible messages of the cross is Jesus said, if you try to defeat violence with violence, then you're only going to perpetuate violence. And eventually, if you overthrow an empire with violence, then you're eventually going to become the empire, because you're going to have to protect your empire through violence. And it's a vicious human cycle. It's the brokenness of humanity, right? And what the cross does for us is to show us, Jesus says, no, there is a deeper reality. And so what the cross does is it says no to this sense of identity and self. So what you have to hate is actually not hate your enemy and violently try to destroy your enemy. What you actually have to hate is the thing that you're putting your trust in to build up your sense of self. You got to let that go. The Apostle Paul put it this way. He said, "For I am crucified with Christ. Nevertheless, I live. Yet not I, but Christ lives in me. And the life I now live, I live by faith through the Son of God, who cleansed me and set me free," right? So to take up our cross. Now, in Jesus' day, in the context of the Gospel of Luke, it was both literal and figurative, that to be a disciple of Jesus meant that you probably would be literally crucified by the Romans, because that was the only way to truly live out the faith in a deeper kingdom of God. And throughout history, people have given up their life for the good news of Jesus. But the good news of Jesus is not to defeat sinners and to establish a political kingdom of power on the earth. The good news of Jesus is to love our enemies and pray for those who persecute us and forgive them, because the power of the good news is forgiveness. The power of the good news is that God loves you, has set us free from sin and death through this cross of Jesus Christ. And it is only when we can come to the foot of this cross and allow that false self, that false sense of identity, to be crucified, that we can then enter into the kingdom of life. And so I want to end this with hope. And so, I mean, I don't know if I should or not, because the truth is that following Jesus is hard. And that's the message. Because in our world today, there are a lot of voices screaming at us to hate people, to hate that other side, to hate those people who are doing it wrong, who are messing up our world. And it's easy to buy into that hatred. But you know what? Hating haters is still hate. That's rough. That's hard. But I do want to give just a little bit of hope, is that I want to just do a new layer, and from the blood of the cross flows a river of new life that kind of washes over the hatred, that transforms that hatred. Now I'm getting into the visions of Revelation last week, is what springs up out of it is the tree of life. So we must hate this life in order to experience true life. So, yeah, that's my meditation for this week. Hey, thanks for joining me today. Again, Steve Thomason, the art pastor, exploring spirituality and scripture through visual art and creativity. And the purpose is to grow deeper in the love of God through Jesus Christ, in the power of the Holy Spirit, for the sake of the world. So I'm going to take our candle, blow it out, and we'll see you next time.